Okay, so today we are jumping straight into, well, the crucible of history. We're talking about France in the late 1780s.
Right. And this isn't just, a simple story about angry mobs.
No, exactly. This is a deep dive into how a financial catastrophe, massive inequality, and hunger all came together.
Perfectly aligned, really, to trigger the French Revolution in 1789.
An event that just fundamentally changed the definition of government itself.
And if you really want to understand the revolution, you have to start with the money, with the balance sheet.
Okay.
By the time Louis XVI was on the throne, the French monarchy was facing what we basically call a total system failure. The country was on the brink of complete bankruptcy.
And the debt wasn't just big, it was astronomical. What was France spending all this money on?
A couple of huge things. First, the king had this habit of spending vast sums on foreign wars.
Like the American Revolution.
Exactly. Supporting the Americans against the British. Second, you had the sheer cost of maintaining the royal court at Versailles.
Which was famously expensive.
Famously, yes. But the structure of the debt was maybe the worst part.
The structure. What do you mean by that?
The country just couldn't tax its wealthiest citizens efficiently, so the government had to constantly borrow money.
And I'm guessing the interest rates weren't great.
They were ruinous. By 1788, something like 50% of the entire national budget was going just to pay the annual interest on their loans.
Wow, so they couldn't even start paying off the actual debt.
Not even close. It's like a debt treadmill where you're running as fast as you can just to stay in the same place.
So if the king knew it was this bad, why not just raise taxes on the people who had all the money?
Oh, he tried. He tried repeatedly. But this is where the whole idea of an absolute monarch is a little misleading.
How so?
He couldn't just decree new taxes. He needed those decrees to be registered by these powerful, high-ranking judicial courts. They were called the parliaments.
And who was sitting in these courts? Let me guess.
Wealthy nobles,
Mm-hmm.
the very people who were exempt from most taxes.
Of course.
They had absolutely no interest in letting the king get power over their money, so they just blocked him at every turn.
They were defending their own privileges.
Exactly. And that forced the king into a corner where his only real option was to try and get some kind of national agreement for new taxes. That's what led him to call the Estates General.
So you've got this collapsing financial system, and it's collapsing because the richest people in the country, legally, don't have to contribute.
That's it.
And that takes us right to the core of the injustice, the three estates.
Yes. This social structure is so vital because it explains why the money problem just instantly became a social and a moral crisis.
It wasn't just about finances anymore.
Not at all. Society was strictly divided into three groups. You had the first estate, which was the clergy, the religious leaders. The second estate was the nobility.
And together they were, what, like 2% of the population?
Less than 2%, yeah. But they controlled almost everything.
How much power and wealth are we talking about?
Well, they owned most of the land. They held all the key jobs in the military, the courts, the government. And crucially, they were exempt from most taxes.
The most important ones, I assume.
The heaviest ones, yeah. Like the main land tax, the taille.
So who was left to pay for everything? The debt, the wars, Versailles?
That whole burden fell on the third estate, which was a staggering 98% of the population.
The commoners. But that wasn't just poor peasants, was it?
No, and that's a super important point. The third estate included poor farmers and city workers, the sans-culottes, but it also included a wealthy, educated, professional class.
The bourgeoisie.
The bourgeoisie. Doctors, lawyers, merchants, successful business owners.
And they had money. So what was their main complaint? Was it just the taxes?
For them, it was less about the money itself and more about, status and humiliation. They funded the state. They were often richer than some nobles, but they had zero political voice.
They couldn't get the top jobs.
Couldn't hold high office. And they were always subject to the power of the privileged classes. So the financial problem became this deep moral injury. They were paying for a system that actively looked down on them.
And for the peasants, the vast majority, there were other burdens on top of the state taxes.
Oh, yes. They owed mandatory labor, the corvée. They had to give part of their crops to the church as tithes and often pay fees to their local lord just to use the mill or the wine press.
So they were constantly working just to support everyone else.
They felt that inequality every single day.
Okay, so now you take this simmering structural unfairness and you add a devastating natural disaster.
And that's where the abstract problem of debt becomes a life-or-death crisis on the streets.
What happened?
You had a series of just catastrophic weather events hit France right before the revolution. We're talking terrible hailstorms in the summer that wiped out crops.
And then the winters.
Some of the harshest winters on record. They froze whatever was left. The grain supply was just decimated.
And when you destroy the grain supply in a country where bread is the main food, what happens to the price?
It explodes. I mean, it skyrockets. And here's the really shocking fact.
Yeah.
The cost of a single loaf of bread rose to equal an entire week's wages for an average Parisian worker.
A week's pay for one loaf of bread. That's mathematically impossible for a family to survive.
It is impossible.
Yeah.
Families were spending 80, even 90% of their income just on bread. This wasn't just, tighten your belt. This was mass malnutrition, starvation.
So desperation takes over.
Completely. People go from demanding rights to just demanding food. The whole country becomes a tinderbox, full of people riding for grain.
So King Louis XVI is cornered, the nobles are blocking him in the courts, the people are starving and rioting in the streets. He has to do something.
He realized he had to force reform. He needed the nobility to pay taxes, but he couldn't legally make them do it. So his solution was to call the Estates General.
Which was a national assembly with representatives from all three estates.
Right, and it hadn't met since 1614, over 170 years.
Wow, so that's basically an admission that the monarchy can't rule alone anymore.
It's a huge deal. And there was this enormous sense of anticipation. To prepare for the meeting in May 1789, people all across France were asked to write down their complaints.
In these documents called the Cahiers de doléances,
The lists of grievances, yeah.
what were the common people asking for in those lists?
The Third Estate's lists were pretty stark. They demanded basic constitutional rights, they demanded equality before the law, and above all, they demanded that the privileged estates pay taxes.
That the burden should be
Shared by everyone based on their wealth. The whole country was talking about reform, but the meeting itself was flawed from the very beginning.
Which brings us to the deadlock, the voting system. How did it traditionally work?
Traditionally, each of the three estates got only one single collective vote.
Okay.
So the first estate got one vote, the second estate got one vote, and the third estate, representing 98% of France, also got only one vote.
Which means the first two estates, the clergy and nobility, could always just vote together.
Exactly, 2-1. They could block any proposal that threatened their privileges. It was basically a guarantee that nothing would ever change.
So the third estate's representatives, many of them those educated lawyers and merchants we talked about, they saw this coming. What did they demand?
They demanded two key things. First, double representation, so they'd have as many delegates as the other two estates combined.
To reflect their size.
Right. And the king actually granted that. But the second demand was the crucial one. They wanted voting to be done by head, one vote for each individual delegate.
Not by order with one vote per estate.
Precisely. Because if they voted by head, the third estate, plus a few liberal nobles and clergy, would have a majority. They could actually pass the tax reforms.
So why did the king resist that?
He was afraid of alienating the entire nobility. He still needed them, so he just delayed. He stalled, which led to weeks of useless arguments.
And that delay was a fatal mistake. What happened when the delegates got tired of waiting?
They took a huge rebellious step. On June 17th, 1789, the Third Estate delegates just declared themselves the National Assembly.
On their own.
On their own.
Yeah.
They said, we are the true, legitimate voice of France because we represent the majority of the nation. It was basically a direct, peaceful coup.
That's the moment the absolute monarchy really ends, even if the king doesn't know it yet.
That's it. Political power now came from the nation, not just the king.
How did the king react?
He was furious. He tried to stop them. On June 20th, he ordered the doors of their meeting hall locked, claimed it needed cleaning.
He was trying to shut them down.
But the delegates refused to go home.
Right.
And this leads to that really famous dramatic scene.
Tennis court oath.
Yes, they just moved to a big indoor tennis court nearby at Versailles. And there, they swore an oath. They promised they would not separate until they had written a constitution for France.
The significance of that is, it's not just about defiance, right? It's redefining power.
It was completely revolutionary. They were saying that the law, the Constitution, should be the highest authority in France. Higher than the king, higher than tradition, higher than anyone's privilege.
So the king was forced to back down.
Publicly, yes. He ordered the other states to join the National Assembly. But secretly, he started bringing foreign mercenary troops closer to Paris. He was getting ready to use military force.
And that move just pours gasoline on the fire in the capital.
It creates immediate, paralyzing fear. The people in Paris are already starving, they're angry about bread, and now they see foreign soldiers gathering. Rumors start flying that the king is going to crush the National Assembly.
And fear plus hunger. That's a dangerous combination. What did the Parisians do?
They started arming themselves. They broke into armories looking for weapons, but they didn't have much gunpowder, and they knew where to find it.
At the Bastille.
The ultimate symbol of the king's power, a huge medieval fortress used as a prison.
So tell us about July 14th, 1789.
On that day, a massive crowd of Parisians, mostly workers and shopkeepers, marched on the Bastille.
What were they after?
They demanded the surrender of the fortress, mainly for the gunpowder and weapons inside. The governor refused. A violent battle broke out. It lasted for hours, and eventually, the citizens breached the walls.
And they took it?
They took control. They executed the governor, and they proved something incredibly important.
Which was?
That the king could no longer rely on his army to enforce his will. The people of Paris had successfully defied royal military power.
So the fall of the Bastille isn't just a prison break, it's the real start of the revolution in the streets.
Absolutely. It's the symbolic end of royal absolutism. And news of it spreads instantly, setting off similar revolts all across the countryside. The old system's authority was just gone.
Looking at the immediate consequences, France changed almost overnight. What did the new National Assembly do first?
They moved incredibly quickly to dismantle the old structure. In August, they officially abolished all the special financial privileges, the tax exemptions, the fees that the nobility and clergy had enjoyed for centuries.
So the system of the three estates was officially over.
Gone. Once and for all.
And their crowning achievement from this period.
They wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen.
A foundational document.
It established that all men are born free and equal in rights. It guaranteed freedom of speech, religion, property, and it stated that sovereignty, ultimate power, resided in the nation, not the king.
It put into law everything the Third Estate had been fighting for.
Everything.
This whole sequence of events, from the debt to the Bastille, it really shows this incredible feedback loop between financial ruin and social injustice.
It really does. I mean, the ultimate takeaway from 1789 is this. When a government lets a system of profound financial inequality continue, where 98% of the people carry the burden for the other 2%,
Yeah.
that structure just becomes too brittle. It can't withstand even a small shock, like a bad harvest. The seeds of revolution are always sown in systemic unfairness.
A lesson that's still relevant today. Good luck with your studies.